Welcome, and of course, we'll start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we'll go to the screen share. And as you may recollect from yesterday, we are in the midst of this very unusual section of narrative in Numbers, although it certainly is consistent with the sort of tragic elements of the book of Numbers. And this is in the last sections of Numbers. And here you'll see, I mean, we won't get to it today, but the degree to which the Israelites just don't appreciate just how much God cares about them and blesses them, etc. So here we are. The situation is that Balak is king of Moab, and he is I see king of Moab. Sorry, Midian, Moab. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. So it's not clear right there. Yeah, I believe. Just trying to think. Maybe he's king of Midian. Sorry, that's terrible. And he decides that he has to use a different strategy because, of course, the Israelites have totally defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and they were on the border to protect the rest of the population, the rest of the nations that were there, and they weren't successful. And so, as Rashi went into quite a bit of detail,
He's king of Moab.
Thank you, king of Moab. Thank you. Just terrible. That the steel sieve, right? At any rate, to use a different strategy, and knowing that Moses was married to a Midianite woman, to find someone who is as good as Moses in using his mouth to curse the Israelites and to weaken them and to prevent them from attacking him and the Moabites. And so Midian and Moab make a pact, even though Rashi tells us they were enemies, long-term rivals and enemies, etc., etc. So Balak sends messengers to Balaam and to see if he will come and do the job. So to Petora, and I suspect that it might be the Euphrates when it says Nahar, the river. Eretz B'nai Amor, this went on. Should we go back and take a look quickly at the original Hebrew in the text here? So, right, Vayishlach Malachim, he sent messengers, El Balaam ben Peor, to Balaam ben Beor, Petora, to Petora. Rashi quotes a really cool midrash from this word Petora, that is an Aramaic word for money changer. I won't go into that detail because we dealt with it yesterday. So, but Petora could be also the name and it could be you could see sort of an anagram of the word Prat, Euphrates, Asher al-Hanahar, which is by the river. And I mentioned that when it talks about the river, it's talking about the Euphrates. If it wants to talk about the Nile, it uses Yaor. The Eretz B'nai Amor, so the land of his people. So whose people? So Rashi's going to tell us. Likrolo, to call to him Lamor, etc. And I won't go more into that, so we'll go into the Rashi again. So Eretz B'nai Amor shel Balak. In other words, his country, meaning where Balak came from, where King Balak came from. Misham Haya, he was there from there as well. V'zeh Haya mitnabe, and the other one, meaning Balaam, would prophesy for Omerlo and say to Balak, Atid ata limloch, you will rule in the future. You will be a king in the future. So this is sort of giving you some background suggested by the text, by exploring the text and deconstructing the text, why, in fact, what's going on here, some of the threads. The im tomar, and should you say, Mipnei ma. So Rashi's going to ask a theological question here. On what account? For what reason? Hishra HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shchinato al Oved Kochavim Rasha. Why would God allow his divine spirit to rest on a wicked heathen? Oved Kochavim, one who worships the stars. Kedei, so here's the answer. Kedei shelo yeh pitchon peh, so that there wouldn't be literally an opening of the mouth, and that's a Hebrew way of saying excuse. So there wouldn't be an excuse le'umot, to the nations, to the other nations, lomar, to suggest, to say, ilu hayu lanu neviim, were it not for the fact that we had prophets, had we not had, had we had prophets, if you'd given us prophets, chazarnu lemutav, we would have also taken the correct direction. We would have worshipped you sincerely, etc. So God said, okay, I will set up prophets for you. You'll have prophets. Vehem pirtzu geder ha'olam. And they managed to, lefrotz geder literally means to break up a fence of the world. So what it means here is to encourage, as you'll see, the heathens, instead of acting morally. And here, by the way, Geder Ha'olam means sort of the things that a person would not do, not because there's someone forcing them not to do it, but it means to act, not to follow their dark side, essentially. And it says basically they went full force to follow the evil inclinations. Shebachila, because originally hayu gedurim ba'arayot. It says originally they abstained from immorality. The nations of the world abstained from immorality. They considered it taboo. V'zeh, and this one, meaning Balaam, natan lahem etzah, gave them advice, lahafkir atzman liznut, to make themselves, to totally, means to sort of open oneself, to be hefker. Hefker is ownerless property, but essentially here it means to just totally debase themselves. And what happened, this is a reference to what happens at the end of the Parsha, of this Parsha, where it talks about how the Israelite men were seduced by the Moabite women. And essentially, the specific advice that Balaam gave Balak and the Moabites was that if they went to the Israelite men and said that basically to offer them sexual pleasure, okay, and that the only thing they were asking for is that they needed to worship their God, that would work. And it did. And there were many, many Israelites who died as a result, especially from the tribe of Shimon. So this is what he's referring to here. And of course, that's in direct contrast to what God is doing for them right now. Likrolo, to call to him. Shehakriya, so in other words, to call for him. This is Balak calling for him for Balaam. Let me just finish this up if you have a comment. Hakriya shelo haita lahana'ato. Okay, the calling was for him, for Balaam. Haita, it was lahana'ato, for his benefit. Shahaya posek lo mamon harbe, because Balak was offering him a lot of money to do this. So it's taking the subtlety of the word law for him. And so for example, when God speaks to Abraham in contrast and says, Lech lacha, go for you. And Rashi, the explanation there, of course, the rabbinic explanation is for your own benefit. Ultimately, it's for your own benefit. So likewise here, it's for Balaam's own benefit. And then he goes on to discuss this. right, where he says, Hine am yatzami Mitzrayim, the nation that came out of Egypt, Hine kisait in haaretz, they cover this face of the earth, Vahu yoshev mimuli, and he is dwelling opposite me. Okay. So we also said ein haaretz could be like the sun, something like that. Yes.
I think you missed Rashi in between Likra Lo and Hine. There's one that says
Yeah, I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went back to look at the text to quote it, right? So you can see the context in which the Rashi is taking place.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Am Yatzami Mitzrayim, the nation that left Egypt, that came out of Egypt. Ve'im tomar ma mesicha, and should you say, well, how's he hurting you? I mean, came out of Egypt, big deal. Hine kisa et ein haaretz. Behold, he covers the face of the earth. Sichon, so he's referring here, Sichon, that he's saying that in a way he's explaining, appears to be explaining ein haaretz as being referring to Sichon v'Og, that Sichon and Og, those two kings, shahayu shomrim otanu, who were guarding us, amdu alehem, they tried to resist them, v'hargum, and they killed them. The Israelites killed them. V'hu yoshev mimuli, this of course referring to the Israelites. He is dwelling opposite me. So notice that the mimuli, right? I said mimuli. What would you'd expect to have a vav here, right there, between the mem and the lamed. But it isn't. He says chaser ketiv. It's written chaser. So there are times these letters, like a yud and a vav and a hey and an aleph, are sometimes called aim hakriya. So you know that in Hebrew we don't have vowel letters as you did in Greek, and consequently in English, etc. We don't have vowel letters, but we do have these letters that sometimes function as a vowel. And you know that very often a vav functions as an o or an u sound, and a yud functions as an e sound or an a sound, right? And a hey at the end implies a sound at the end, etc. So these are called emakriya, and there are times when a word is considered malay, meaning they put in those vowel letters, and sometimes chaser, meaning they leave out the vowel letters. And so Rashi's explaining here that mimuli is written without the emakriya of vav in it, right? Chaser ketiv. So he says, Krovim he, they are, let me make sure that, lahachritenu, they are about to cut us off. And he says, because the word mal means to cut off. And of course, we refer to the one who cuts off the foreskin as a mohel, right? And the same word is used to refer to being circumcised, meaning the foreskin was cut off. So he's saying mimali is also implying the fact that it's written chaser also has the secondary meaning of lahachriteni, to cut me off. As in, and Rashi gives the example in Psalm 118, it's in the Hallel, ki amilam, but I will cut them off, my enemies. Let's go on. I think we are ready for the next verse. Okay, right. Va'ata. So, and now, so this is what he's saying. This is what he wants. Lechana. This is Balak speaking to Balaam, right? Go, please. Arali, curse for me et ha'am hazeh, this nation. Ki atzum hu mimeni, because he far outnumbers me. He is mightier than I am. Ulai, perhaps, uchal nakeh bo, I will be able to either to smite him, wipe him out, but you'll see that Rashi has some other explanations of this nakebo. And I believe there should be actually a dot in that kaf. Va'agarshenu min haaretz, and I will chase him from the land.
Yeah, I have a dot in mine.
There should be grammatical rules. Okay, I could take a moment to explain, but I'm not, because it'll take us away from the actual meaning. But okay, ki yadati, for I know, et asher tevarech, that which you bless, mevorach, is blessed, v'asher ta'or, and that which you curse, will be cursed. So, nakebo, right? We will be able to cut, get rid of them. Aniva ami. So it says we will, right? We will. I and my people, nakebahem. We will be able to smite them. Davar acher, another interpretation. Lashon Mishnah. We find the Hebrew in the Mishnah that we could consider this nakeh from a Mishnaic Hebrew point of view. And in Baba Metzia, it's in Mishnah, but he's referring to the Talmud here, page 105b. Here we go. He uses minakeh lo min hadamim, meaning that he deducts some of the price, some of the cost. And then minakeh means to reduce or to deduct. L'chaser mehem, so that what he meant, what Balaam meant, what Balak meant here was to reduce their numbers somewhat, not necessarily to wipe them out, but to weaken them. For I know. So how do I know? I know, right? How? Al Yedei Milchemet Sichon. I know this from the war that Sichon waged against, I believe it was against the Midianites.
It says here Moab.
Moab, the Moabites? Okay,
Yeah.
see, I always get terrific. Okay. But it is that she'azarto, that you helped him, lahakot, to defeat it. There we go. See, I didn't read far enough. Should have gone further. At Moab. You helped him defeat Moab. This is referring to earlier on. In the previous Parsha, they talk about the fact that the Amorites had defeated the Moabites in a previous battle before the Israelites came and defeated the Amorites. So he is, even though it's not said explicitly anywhere, there's a tradition that apparently that Balaam helped Sichon conquer Moab, and because of that, Balak was aware of this, how capable Balaam was of helping in this way.
Rabbi?
Yes, sir.
In the previous Parsha, they asked for passage through Edom and for passage through the Amorites. They just asked for the passage. We're just going to go through you to get to Israel.
Yeah.
And they refused.
Yeah.
So then they attacked Moses and the Israelites. They attacked them.
Yes.
They didn't want to fight them. And the same way here, Balak thinks they're going to attack him. Actually, Moses and the Israelites camping there near Moab, they wanted to just go past it into so he can go to Israel. But Balak thinks that they're going to attack him, and he's scared to death because there's so many. He looks over there over the mountain and sees a camp, and he says, "Oh my God, there's so many of the Israelites. They're just covering the whole earth." He goes scared. He's so scared. So he wants some Balaam to curse him.
Right. Well, okay. So with the Amorites, they had made a treaty with the Canaanites.
Right.
They would protect them, and that's why they went to battle the Israelites. They were supposed to protect the Canaanites. So that's why they went out in battle. Yeah. So you're right. Fear is a great motivator, for sure. It really, you think about the Vietnam War, and it was the fear of communist domination that basically, as I understand it, and maybe I should be corrected, but that is what I understand motivated American policy regarding the whole Vietnam disaster. So history repeats itself. So, Vayelchu ziknei Moav, and the elders of Moab, v'ziknei Midian, and the elders of Midian, they went, Vayelchu, they went, uksamim biyadam, with their enchantments in hand. They went along with their enchantments. Vayavo el Balaam, and they came to Balaam. Vayidabru elav divrei Balak, and they spoke to him the words of Balak. So, uksamim biyadam, and so the question, of course, is it begs a question: what is it talking about? What's it? Why does it say this? Right? What's important about it? So Rashi says, kol mine ksamim, meaning all types of tools of enchantment. Shelo yomar, that he shouldn't say, that Balaam shouldn't say, ein klei tashmishai imi. He says, I don't have any tools. I don't have the tools that I need. In other words, to prevent him from having an excuse not to do the job, right? So you forgive me for a moment, because there was an old sort of plumbing is one of the most, it's a tough job, being a plumber, and you need all kinds of tools to be able to deal with the plumbing, and you'll understand in a moment. So there's a sort of this reputation that the plumber comes to call on to repair and winds up saying, listen, I don't have that tool. I have to go back and get the tool that I need, the specific tool I need to be able to do this plumbing job. So the joke is, I forgot them back home kind of thing. So this guy comes to become a plumber and to be an apprentice plumber. And he comes to the plumber and he says, I'd like to work for you. And the plumber says to him, well, where are your references? And the guy says, I forgot them at home. And the guy says, you're hired. Okay, never mind. We'll go on. Davar acher, another interpretation. So this word kesim can also mean an omen. So kesim ze natlu biadam ziknei Midian, that the elders of Midian took along with them this sign, this omen. Amru, they said this was the sign. Im yavo imanu b'pamazot. If Balaam comes when we ask him this time, right? If he doesn't put us off, if he comes right away, yesh bo mamash, the guy can do the job. So this was the sign they had. He is going to be effective. The im yidchenu, but if he puts us off, ein bo to'elet, he's no good. He's not going to be effective. Lefichach, and for this reason, look at the close reading of the text here. Keshe'amar lahem linu po halayla, when Balaam said to them, lodge here overnight. Amru, they said to themselves, they thought, ein bo tikva, there's no hope in this guy. He's hopeless. Hanichuhu, they left him. They left him alone, v'halchu lahem, and they went off. Shenemar, and this is the close reading of the text. If you look at the text, it says, Vayeshvu sarei Moav im Balaam, and the princes of Moab remained with Balaam. It doesn't say this explicitly. This is implied because it says this, the princes of Moab, Aval ziknei Midian, but the princes of Midian, halchu lahem, they took off. And we'll stop right there. So, any comments, any thoughts?
Was the Amorites and Moabs two different tribes?
Yes.
They had. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know. Did they combine together against Israel?
No. Okay, so careful. We were talking about the Midianites and the Moabites.
Yeah,
The Amorites had been defeated, yes. So initially, and in fact, it wasn't the end of the story, but yeah. They combined they had a common enemy, and so they unified to try and fight the common enemy. And I will stop the share.
So according to that last Rashi,
Mhm.
the Midianites were wiser than the Moabites. They figured out that Balaam wasn't going to do the job.
Correct. Yes. You
Do
know
you
what?
have any reason to understand why they would have been wiser?
Because Moses' wife was a Mennonite. Remember that.
So maybe, Harlan, maybe there is some connection
They
there.
knew them better.
Maybe they had that omen. The thing that's sort of so sad, we're talking about family, family quarrels and things like that. You know who Moab is descended from, right? Who is Moab descended from?
Lot.
Correct.
Mhm.
Abraham's nephew.
Mhm.
But then, of course, we consider the Arabs to be and they themselves consider themselves to be descendants of Ishmael, right? And
Cousins
how do we
cousins
get it?
always fighting over property and
Yeah, it's a shame.
inheritances and stuff.
Well, this is the great irony of the book of Genesis, right? What it's coming to try and teach us. How do you behave as family? Where do you?
And yes, you know what I learned from Genesis? Don't have favorites. Do not have favorites amongst your children. Just don't.
It's very,
It ends badly.
well. You have to understand that we have a hard time controlling our emotions.
Mhm.
The Bible does such an amazing job of setting up Joseph as the favorite, because number one, if Jacob had been able to script his life, how many wives would he have had? Correct.
Hey,
And who would that have been?
Rachel.
So first of all, he doesn't script his life. Okay, he can't. None of us really do. Okay,
Mhm.
so he winds up not being able to simply marry Rachel, who he simply married, because he was deeply in love with her. And not only that, she cannot bear a child to him for years and years and years, childless. And finally, she bears a child to him, ultimately. But I mean, talk about tragedy, right? Okay, so who's he going to love, right? If he isn't going to love Joseph. And then on top of that, when she finally gives birth to Benjamin, what happens? She dies.
He dies.
She dies. So who does Jacob have left?
But if she hadn't been under all that stress from trying to compete with Leah, she might have conceived sooner. It's a thing.
I think that's Golda, that is going out on a large limb. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's going out on that would come under the category of my late father, who used to say, "Oifa Maisa Fregman Nishken Kashas." It's a story. It's part of the literary, layer of it. But the point that I'm trying to make is that Jacob is essentially totally set up to absolutely adore Joseph. And then there were other things as well, okay? Because Joseph and he had a lot in common. They'd study together and they shared time together. It's hard.
It is
hard not to play favorites, but you're right. I mean, you're right.
That's what I learned from that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a story some other time
Okay.
about my family and how that
Oh,
all worked out.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can only imagine how painful. And again, you understand how the brothers feel. How painful that had to be. I mean, that creates, that situation creates deep psychological wounds.
Not to mention Leah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Oh, she is. Yes.
Go ahead, Golda.
Oh, no. She's a tragic character.
Well, but interestingly enough, who does Jacob wind up being buried with?
Leah,
Who
okay.
gets buried in the Bay of Machpelah with Jacob? There's a lot of lessons here, by the way, about life, and expectations to try and prepare us for expectations, right? You know that I have the guaranteed formula for depression. Guaranteed formula.
What?
Unrealistic expectations. Because when you have unrealistic expectations, and so inevitably your expectations don't get fulfilled, you get angry. And what's depression?
And entitlements.
Exactly. All right, you taught me that word. You did. Let's stop the recording and
All right.